A word of warning about this episode. I'm going to invite you to dig up your past. And I know that for some, that's a very hard ask. For you've worked a long time to lock out the past, to tuck it all away in a deep, dark hole. Yet it's impossible to be real with yourself, with God, and with others if you aren't real about everything. I want to encourage anyone who struggles on this island or any other island for that matter to seek out professional help. You don't have to go it alone. There's no guilt, no shame, and no shoulding on yourself. There's just you, a sacred child of God, dealing with your story. Oh, and a whole heaping helping of God's grace. Hey there, it's David. I bet you're wondering about the third rule of being real. The first rule of being real is that you can no longer apply the labels of secular, which means of the world, and sacred, which means of God, to your life. Because you've made the choice to commit your life to the care and control of Jesus, everything in your life is now sacred. Rule number 2 of being real is that grace abounds. God's grace is a done deal, regardless of what you've done, what you do, what you didn't do, or what you won't do. Well, before I share with you the third rule of being real, I want to tell you a story. It's a story because it has characters, plot, setting, conflict, and resolution. Not a story in that it's made up. This is a true story that happened to me in my first year of ministry. So, let's go island hopping. Many moons ago, I served a little church in Lone Pine, Pennsylvania. I had just graduated from seminary and I wasn't yet ordained. In fact, this little church would be the congregation that would make it possible for me to be ordained. For in my tradition, local congregations make the decision about someone's ordination. The wider church only ordains after the local church approves. There was an older couple in this church that were farmers. They didn't grow corn or wheat. They didn't raise cattle or sheep or hogs. They bred miniature horses. One day I got a call from this couple asking me if I would come and visit. They had a question to ask me, but didn't want to ask me over the phone. So we scheduled a time for me to stop by the farm the following day. When I sat with them in their living room, they were obviously very distressed. See, they had a grandson who had lost his way and got hooked on heroin. And to make matters worse, they just found out that this drug use had made him HIV positive. Sadly, in that day, an HIV positive diagnosis was literally a death sentence. The only question now was how much longer would he live? They went on to share that they didn't believe that he had any faith, let alone a faith in Jesus. But they felt led to ask me to try to have a relationship with him, to walk with him as he died of AIDS. They knew that he would be alone, for other than this couple, he had no other family in the picture. He also had no friends to speak of because AIDS was seen as a plague. Thus, everyone abandoned him, except his grandparents. Well, I reluctantly agreed, even though I felt strongly that I was in way over my head. But I still wanted to help in some way. I figured, what would it hurt to go and visit with him? So we agreed to all go over and see him together. A few days later, we drove into town to visit their grandson. He lived in a dinky little dingy apartment that was on the first floor of an old house. This visit was very weird. I don't think he understood why his grandparents were visiting him with their pastor. He made it very clear that he didn't believe in God or Jesus or any of it. As we left his apartment that day, I never expected to see him again. Well, to my surprise, about a week later, my phone rang and it was the grandparents. They told me that their grandson asked about me and wanted me to come over and visit with him again, this time without supervision. So I gave him a call and set up a time to visit. Let me describe this young man's physical condition. I believe that he was a younger man than myself. I never asked his age, or if I did, I've forgotten. Whatever his age, he looked very old and tired. He was probably about 5'9" and maybe 100 pounds, soaking wet. His hair was long and he was sporting a full beard. Well, a beard that was as full as a really sick person could grow. He smoked like a chimney and cussed like a trucker. During this first unsupervised meeting, we talked about music, drugs, his family, and the world. Nothing too deep, and definitely nothing about Jesus or faith or religion. As I was leaving, he told me that he really enjoyed hanging out with me and asked if I would be willing to come back, to which I agreed. I told him I would be back the following Thursday, which became over the next few months the day of the week that I would always visit. Every Thursday afternoon, I would sit with my new friend in his dinky little dingy apartment and talk about anything and everything. We eventually even broached the subject of faith in Jesus. Well, his health went downhill rather quickly, and a little over 2 months after I started visiting him, he ended up in a hospice house. I would still go and visit on Thursday afternoons. Now, because of what was happening to him, the discussions of faith, death, heaven, and hell became more frequent. I told him about the love of God and the reality of amazing grace. I assured him that God has always and will always love him. I wasn't sure if he believed any of it, for he never gave me any indication that he had changed his mind about faith in Jesus. But we kept meeting and kept talking about anything and everything. Well, one late night my phone rang at home, and it was his grandparents. They told me to get down to the hospice house, for they didn't believe that their grandson had much more time. I threw on some clothes, a baseball hat, and I sped into town to see him, probably, I thought, for the last time. As I entered his room, I was blown away by what I saw. This was the exact same room in which I had visited him several times before. This was the exact same guy that I had visited with over the last couple of months. But as I entered that room that night, I didn't see him lying in that bed. I saw, as I perceived it, Jesus laying there with his eyes closed, dying. It was such a powerful experience that all I could do was just stand there in awe and cry. This wasn't the heroin addict, AIDS victim that I knew laying in that bed. It was Jesus. Just then his grandparents arrived. I turned around to see who was entering the room, and as I turned back, I once again saw my dying friend in the bed. It was literally a different person, the person I expected to see when I first entered the room. I tried to tell all of this to his grandparents, but I could see by the look in their eyes that they were either not buying what I was selling or they were too grief-stricken to even hear what I was saying. It was only about 5 minutes later that he took his last breath and left this world. Well, I don't get many things. I don't claim to be the brightest bulb in the room, but I know what I saw. I saw Jesus taking this young man's place in death. I saw the grace of God given to a guy who, by the world's perspective, literally threw his life away. I believe that when death comes around for me and I enter heaven, I will see this young man again. For me, that's the grace of God, loving us in spite of us, meeting us in our unworthiness and making us worthy, not because of who we are, but because of who Jesus is. Having shared that story with you, I hope you're able to better understand my particular brand of crazy. This gives you a little insight into why I believe the topic of being real and the grace of God is so important. For I never got down on my knees with this young man. I never baptized this young man. I never even truly knew if he had decided to follow Jesus. All I do know is that Jesus was there in that room, in that bed, paying the price for that young man's fractured, faulty, sin-stained life. And that's all that really matters. All of this leads me to the third rule of being real as a committed follower of Jesus. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Your past doesn't get to dictate your future. For God isn't judging your future by your past, so why are you? Just because you've messed things up or gone the wrong way or made bad decisions or had bad things happen to you in the past doesn't mean that today you're doomed to a life separated from God and condemned to hell. God doesn't save you because of who you've been, who you are, or who you will be. God saves you because of who God has been, who God is, and who God will be. Forgiveness, salvation, the indwelling power of the Holy Spirit, all of it isn't about who you are or what you've done. It's about who God is and what God has done. God loves you just the way you are. But God also loves you so much that God doesn't want to leave you just the way you are. God desires to see you become a complete you. Remember from season 1 that being a complete you right here, right now, the best you that you can be in this time and in this place, is our definition of perfect. The you that God knit together in your mother's womb. The you that God has created and gifted you to be. Yet, having said all of that, there's a fly in the ointment. There's a uniquely human condition that makes what I just shared not only hard to understand, but even harder to actually live into. The fly in the ointment of this whole grace of God thing, this whole today is the first day of the rest of your life thing, is that us humans by nature lean so heavily on what we do or don't do. Life is about goals, conquest, effort, and achievement. We all base what we believe in on what we can see, taste, touch, smell, hear, feel, and achieve. This is why we all crave proof of faith through the outward actions of those around us. This is why we want the conversion experience. This is why we want the public profession of faith. We want to be able to, without a shadow of a doubt, judge whether or not someone is saved. Understanding the third rule of being real, today is the first day of the rest of your life, requires you to stand under the fact that God is calling you to be different. Or as we've been calling it on these islands, transformed. For you can't expect to be the exact same person, live in the exact same way that you've always lived, and experience the grace of God, can you? That's like wanting to lose weight but never changing what you eat or how much physical activity you get. Yes, there's effort on your part that's required in order to experience a transformed life. Yet this effort is in response to what God has already done. You don't do what you do in order to earn the grace of God. You are who you are because you've received the grace of God. If you aren't experiencing the grace of God, it probably means that you haven't truly accepted God's gift of grace. Deep down, you're still trying to earn God's grace. You're still trying to work your way into God's good graces. Well, there's a problem with the perspective of earning, working, merit, and achievement when it comes to the grace of God. All of this work, all of this effort on your part to earn God's grace causes you to require all of that same work and all of that same effort on the part of others in order to earn your grace, let alone God's grace. For your focus on achievement when it comes to your relationship with God requires that every life must prove themselves to you. When you take the step to commit your life to the care and control of Jesus, that means something. It means that you've taken a step into a new day, a new way. It means that your relationship with God is no longer about achievement, earning, merit, or works. Your relationship with God is now about being who you've been created and gifted to be. And nobody has been created and gifted to be the judge and jury of anyone else's relationship with God. Being saved by grace through faith in Jesus means that you've taken a step away from your old self and taken a step toward your new self. It means that you've embraced the power of possibility. And this new step, this new day, this new way, this possibility isn't supposed to be the same as every other day and every other way. This is the truth, for taking the step to commit your life to the care and control of Jesus invites you to be real. And one of the hardest parts of being real is actually allowing yourself, as well as others, to be real. Not real like you're who everyone thinks you are. Not real like being someone that somebody wants you to be. But real like the real you, warts and all, faults and foibles, strengths and weaknesses, mistakes, missteps, bad decisions, and all. Being real means that you recognize, acknowledge, and embrace what you've done. Being real means that you recognize, acknowledge, and embrace what's been done to you. And being real means that you recognize, acknowledge, and embrace what's been done for you. For you can't just be real about some things. The invitation to be real covers it all. Yet, and this is where you struggle because of your need to achieve and to see, taste, touch, smell, feel, and hear how others have achieved, what being real looks like in one person's life isn't necessarily the same as what being real looks like in another person's life. I believe my friend in my story was being real as he could be in that time and in that place. In other words, he was perfect. Was I looking for more? Yes. I was looking for the conversion experience. I was looking for a public profession of faith. I was looking for a bathtub baptism. I was looking for a feather in my cap. For I believed that God would love me if I led this guy to faith in Jesus. I was looking for anything that would prove to me that this guy was saved, so that I could feel better about my relationship with God. I wasn't looking for any of those things because of him. I was looking for all of those things because of me. It was my desire to see something different from him regarding faith in Jesus. It was my desire to be seen by God and loved by God because of what I'd done in this young man's life. Yet, here's the truth about God's grace. What I saw or didn't see wasn't and isn't nearly as important as what he actually experienced regarding faith in Jesus. That was only important to my skewed understanding of the grace of God. Who's to say that this young man dying of AIDS because of a heroin addiction in the waxing and waning of his final hours didn't, in his very own way, commit his life to the care and control of Jesus? Did I not believe that deathbed conversions were a thing? Yet he had no way to prove it to anyone. Or I guess it would be better said that I had no way to prove it to myself. And therein lies the rub. Why do we put such an emphasis on proving it? Well, maybe because us fractured, faulty, sin-stained, sacred children of God operate out of this mentality for almost everything in our lives. Prove it, then I'll believe it. When we don't see what we would deem as acceptable proof of a committed follower of Jesus, we doubt that the person is actually a committed follower of Jesus. But why? Wouldn't it just be better to simply leave the proving to God? Wouldn't it just be better to let other people's past be the past? Wouldn't it be better to simply let people be right here, right now? Let bygones be bygones? No need for proof of transformation? Or it would be better said, no need for your particular brand of proof of transformation. The answer to these questions is simple. Yes, it would be better to simply leave the proving up to God. Yes, it would be better to let people's past be the past. Yes, it would be better to simply let people be right here, right now. Yet, this isn't easy. For deep down in those places you don't like to talk about, you believe that you have to earn God's grace. You believe that you have to prove yourself to God and to others. Thus, you apply this very same logic to everyone else. And this reality is precisely the reason for your need of transformation. For as a follower of Jesus, you are called to now understand that from this day forward, real is the name of the game. But let's be real, pun intended. You need to be real about who you've been, what you've done, what's been done to you, and what's been done for you, if you ever desire to actually be real, and if you ever desire to allow anyone else to actually be real. This is where the real power of being real comes into play. This acknowledgement of who you've been, what you've done, what's been done to you, and what's been done for you will make it that much harder to repeat old patterns, that much harder to put on old masks and keep old secrets. And it will make it that much harder for you to perseverate on what other people are doing or not doing in your opinion. The whole remove the log from your own eye before you deal with the speck in someone else's eye analogy. Being real with yourself, with God, and with others will make it that much harder to fall back into old ruts of dealing with yourself and the world around you. It will be that much harder to continue to keep your secrets and wear your masks. For once a secret is exposed to the light, it loses any and all power in your life. Once you're real, you realize that every morning when you open your eyes, you have an opportunity to be a new creation. Every day is a fresh start, a blank slate, just waiting for you to write new words and paint new pictures. And this realization not only transforms your relationship with yourself and your life, it also transforms your relationship with others and their lives. For your relationships will no longer be about achievement and the proof of achievement, in your opinion. Standing under the truth that today is the first day of the rest of your life means that even though someone has treated you wrong in the past, you're released from giving them power over your life today. Or, just because you've treated someone else wrong in the past, you're released from continuing to treat them wrong, or continuously beating yourself up over treating them wrong. Standing under the truth that today is the first day of the rest of your life means that who you are, a sacred child of God, has nothing to do with what you do, what you've done, or what you will do. And standing under the truth that today is the first day of the rest of your life means that who someone else is, a sacred child of God, has nothing to do with what they do, what they've done, or what they will do. Being a follower of Jesus means that you're more than a conqueror. Whatever it is, it doesn't define you. The decisions that you've made, the steps that you've taken, or the steps that have been taken for you, don't get to be your identity. Because, and this is so important to never forget, you're a sacred child of God. Maybe you were abused as a child in some way, shape, or form. I would never downplay the significance of this kind of trauma in anyone's life. But I do believe that through God all things are possible. I do believe that even you can walk away from your yesterday into a new today. The today that can be the first day of the rest of your life. What has happened to you, what you've experienced, doesn't get to define your identity. Maybe you've been a horrible person. Maybe you've hurt people. Maybe you've been judgmental. Maybe you've never done anything. Maybe your life has been very vanilla and quite boring. Well, none of that matters. All that matters now is that because of the grace of God, you have the possibility of being a new creation, the possibility of overcoming anything and everything in your life, the possibility of your past no longer defining your future, the possibility of today being the first day of the rest of your life. But the world will try to label you and identify you as that which has happened to you or that which you've done. These labels are the world's only solution to your created in the image of Godness and your desire to be real. On this island, you're invited to go through the process of acknowledgement, confession, and forgiveness. I am who I am, warts and all. a sacred child of God. This is the process of being real with yourself, with God, and with others. But never forget that you're first and foremost a sacred child of God. This is your identity. Maybe you're a sacred child of God who struggles as a result of sexual abuse. Maybe you're a sacred child of God who struggles as a result of physical or mental abuse. Maybe you're a sacred child of God who has hurt people and has made many bad decisions. Maybe you're a sacred child of God who has had a wonderful life. Yet in all things, you're still a sacred child of God. Let go of any need to achieve so as to live up to anyone else's standards for a follower of Jesus. You can be a complete you right here, right now, regardless of what anyone else thinks you should be or who anyone else thinks you really are. Let the shoulders should. Let the haters hate. Let the judgmental judge and let the doubters doubt. You're a sacred child of God, and today is the first day of the rest of your life.
Hey there, it's Michelle. Island Hopping is a production of Journey to Be Ministries and is sponsored by Beneva Christian Church in Sarasota, Florida. You can find Beneva Christian on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and the Beneva Christian app, as well as their website, benevachristian.com. If you'd like to contact my husband, just drop him an email at islandhoppingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can text him by clicking on the link in the show notes.